Hello and welcome back. It is a cool and cloudy July 21st with rain and cool temperatures in the forecast the next couple days. So we'll have to see what that brings us. We had some pretty good thunderstorms and moisture events in some areas over the weekend, but really very little here in Nobleford. My gauge never picked up anything at all. So we'll see whether the Carmangay area or farther south got more over the weekend yet this week. And let's take a look, see what the crops are doing. Dryland barley around Nobleford progressing pretty quickly. We are in the soft dough stage, but only just barely. Some of these heads are really starting to get pretty close to hard dough stage or swath timing, but we're not quite there yet. But probably another week or so, and we will be. But things are looking not too bad. At least we've had enough moisture to get all these heads filled. Some of the dryland canola this year really is looking quite fantastic compared to how it has looked the last couple of years. This field up by Carmangay doing very good compared to last year. Really good pod set in here. Yeah, there is some blanks here and there from heat blast and drought at early flower, but a lot of those later set pods are looking pretty good. But this is the time of the year when we do need to start watching for nymphaligus. You can see I've got some in here. See if I can focus on one of them here. So this little guy here, we start to see patterning on the back, which means he's going to be actively feeding. There's a bunch more in here that are still too small. They won't really be actively feeding. Well, they will be. They just won't be able to pierce the pods to cause damage because they're about the size of an aphid at the moment. So I'll have to keep an eye on these ligus. Once the instars get large enough that they can start piercing the pods, then they start counting towards threshold. Well, my dryland wheat plots are all looking pretty good. I still wouldn't say I see any differences in height or staging or anything like that. Staging wise, we're pretty much in the milk stage, so when I squeeze these heads, I'm still getting a lot of milk out of them, but they are starting to progress. And with the recent moisture in the last couple of weeks, they shouldn't have any problem filling out. We should actually have pretty good yield here this year. Well, in some fields of wheat in Durham, there is a little bit of rust that is still around. So this leaf here, I just found this is up by Nobleford and Barron's area on irrigation. Conditions for the development of rust have been pretty good. Rust likes cooler weather with high humidity or moisture. It doesn't particularly like hot and dry weather. So I'm starting to see a little bit more of it around as I go around this week. But really, like, this field is in milk stage. So once these heads are filled, and they're not far from being filled, then the threshold for spraying rust really does go up rapidly. So if you're in soft dough stage, for example, it's really probably not worth spraying for rust unless you have an absolutely massive problem with it. But I can't see that being the point or the case at the moment here. This field we did spray a fungicide at head timing to protect for Fusarium head blight, and our flag leaves, aside from a little bit of rust here and there, are all pretty clean. Once you get lower down into the canopy, there is some septoria and tan spot that was developing already before we had sprayed, so nothing too unusual there. Well, we're getting some silage barley off today, although it's starting to rain pretty hard, so I don't think we'll be going much longer. But this irrigated barley should be weighing up pretty good. We're well into the soft dough stage here, and it's apparently coming off pretty good moisture and tonnage so far. Well, Tuesday afternoon now. We've had a pretty steady rain since yesterday afternoon. We got some pretty wet, mucky field conditions with about another 1.5 inches of rain fallen since yesterday. So I think this is now officially the wettest July I remember in at least the last 10 years. Well, it's that time of the year again. We need to start talking about Reglone and pea desiccation. So if you want a more detailed, in-depth look, then look about somewhere over here. I'm going to have a video link to a video that we did with Syngenta a few years ago on perfectly how to stage and how Reglone works. But let's do a little shorter version today. Well, the biggest thing is staging. Ideally, you don't want to have any grass, green, peas, or lentils in a field, or certainly a lot less than 10% of the field should be grass green. So this is a little bit better of a look here, but you'll see we do still have some very grass green pods. If we saw more of like this, which we would call like lime green, then we would be fine. These pods are starting to mature. These ones still a little bit green. So when you see patches like this that are still grass green, that means we're just not there yet. So we need to give areas like this more time because Reglone won't help grass green areas mature as quickly as we would like it to. Of course, water rate is important too, especially for helping dry down things like weeds. Take this patch of kochia, for example. We want to be coming in here with a minimum of 20 gallons of water. And if we spray in only one direction on, say, a big kochia plant, what you'll see like a spray shadow almost. So if we were, say, coming in this way, you see we'd burn off that one side of the plant, but we'd still have green material on the other side. So wherever you have really big or really thick kochia, such as along a headland or something like that, you actually want to, I know it's kind of a pain, but spray it in one direction and then spray it coming back the other, full rate both times. You will end up being way more happy with your kochia control along headlands and stuff if you do it that way. As far as spray timing goes, you want to be applying Regulon in the evening, not during the day when the sun is out. Regulon is activated by the sun, but you need to give it a little bit of time to actually get into the plant prior to the sunlight coming out. So early in the morning, or better yet, the evening before is going to be the best time. So watch the forecast. Even though today would be a good day to have had it done last night, field conditions are so wet, there's no way you could have got in here with a ground sprayer anyways, so you'd have to do it by airplane. Of course, if you're spraying anything this week, whether it's Regulon or a fungicide, pay attention to the weather. Now that we've got all this water and mud and puddles everywhere, every time the sun comes out, everything is getting real hazy, which means we have really high humidity, which can lead to a lot of thunderstorms. I think the next forecast, or the next week's forecast for warm weather, is going to have us with a lot of thunderstorms in the evening. Although if that holds true to form so far, they're mostly going to go north of us and hit the city of Calgary instead. Now, there is still some later flowering canola fields that are still in full bloom, like this one here. This is a field of Cantera canola, and so far it's looking very, very nice. But as you can tell by my state of my sweep net here, field condition is still very wet and soupy, or literally just dripping off in here. So no way to get accurate bug counts in conditions like this after the last couple days of rain. Pretty much all the bugs have been washed out of the canopy, so I'm not expecting to really find anything for the next day or so in here until that canopy really dries out. Some of these wheat fields that are still in milk stage, we are starting to see a bit of aphids starting to show up in them. Aphid populations usually do come up pretty good late July and into August. Now, once we're out of the milk stage, there's not a whole lot these aphids can do as far as feeding damage, but they can transmit disease, so you need to be on the watch for that. Here we have some green lentils that are still very green. There's actually still a few blooms in the field, and lots of pods are still developing and starting to fill. But we are starting to see a little bit of disease in the field. So every once in a while there is a yellowing plant like this that has scorched looking leaves, and more than likely this is probably stem phyllium, which does tend to affect plants a little bit different than something like anthracnose or verticillium or something like that, where we're going to see more of stem lesions. Here, these stems, there's no lesions really on the stems, there's no bullseyes on the leaves or pods. The leaves are basically just dying from the tip back and turning black. They almost look burned on some of the plants, and almost looks like there's a little bit of botrytis going on at the same time, possibly invading those infected weakened tissues. So at this point, this crop is still green enough. We could probably come in here with a fungicide, but at this point in lentils, we really need to be watching our pre-harvest intervals, because depending on when the crop is going to be ready to desiccate, it may just be too late and not worth applying a fungicide. Well, this field of dryland fall rye is getting pretty close to swath timing, but you'll notice we have heads at two different stages in here. So we have some tiller regrowth now that we have some wet conditions here. This field got rain on it probably 3-4 weeks ago now, and you can see it has started to put out new tillers that are just flowering now. So really these tillers have no hope of ever filling, so we pretty much ignore them and look for the main stem heads. This is where all of our yield is going to be. The others basically just consider them like weeds. So these ones, we are fully formed. We're basically in like late soft dough, probably about a week away from hard dough stage. So we want to swath rye once it is mature enough to do so. If you let it stand too long, it's pretty typical. It shells out quite bad, and you can lose quite a few bushels on the ground. So of course it is always a risk swathing as well, because these swaths are typically going to be pretty big puffy swaths. And if they get rained on a few times, then that's not a good thing either. So it all depends. Well, I think that's where we're going to leave things for this week. It's supposed to be a hot and humid weekend, so I'm sure My phone is probably going to blow up with more disease pictures the next few days, so I think next week we're mostly going to be following up on some late season disease as well as doing some desiccation timing and more pulse fields. So we'll see you next week.